Kings chapter 18, which is probably someplace you've probably never read, but maybe you have, and it's a really amazing story about a guy named Elijah and the life that he lived, and it comes to this moment here, and we're going to read through it and talk about it, but man, let's listen. Let's ask the Lord if he would open our ears to hear this evening. And so just wherever you're at, bow your head. And just in your own heart, just ask the Lord, Lord, speak to me. Lord, I pray for every student and leader in here, and Lord, my own heart. God, would you speak to us? Would you speak to us this evening? I don't know about anyone else, but God, I'm desperate for you, and I need to hear from you. And so, God, would you speak? It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, so let me give you a kind of a recap of chapter 18. There is a guy named Obadiah, which is just an amazing name, and he is living in the right way after the things of God, but he's living in a culture and in a time where that's not the greatest thing to do. There's a king named Ahab and his wife Jezebel who were massacring and killing followers of God, of Yahweh. And so what has happened is these gods have infiltrated into the nation of Israel to the point where they start worshiping a different god called Baal. You may have heard that before, that name, but it's a god that they have prophets and prophetess and all these things, and that's all going on in the nation of Israel. God's chosen people are now worshiping someone besides actual God, right? They're worshiping something that they've come up with, that they've made, and they've started seeking after this thing. But a guy named Obadiah took some of the people of God, and he's hiding them in caves, right? So that's pretty amazing. He's hiding them in caves all over the place, and he's feeding them all the time, and he's bringing them food and bringing them water. And here's the thing. It hasn't rained in 3.5 years. 3.5 years. God has shut off the heavens, and the rain is not coming. And if you've ever been in a drought of any kind, this is pretty bad, right? This is bad stuff. Because you can't see, you can't grow things, you can't gather food, the lakes begin to dry up, all of those things start to happen all around. It can be devastating to an entire country, and they haven't seen any rain in 3.5 years. And Elijah shows up and talks to Obadiah. And he wants Obadiah to go and talk to Ahab, who's the king and the ruler who's following after these false gods, and tell him that I'm here. Go tell Ahab that I'm here, is what Elijah says. And here's the thing. He's been trying to kill Elijah all along. And Obadiah says this. I just want you to hear this interaction as it unfolds here, because it's just, well, let me read it. And as Obadiah was on the way, behold, Elijah met him, and Obadiah recognized him and fell on his face and said, "It is you, my lord, Elijah." And he answered him, "It is I. Go tell your lord, behold, Elijah is here." And he said, this is Obadiah's response. "How have I sinned that you would send your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me?" He's like, he's like, "Oh, yes, you're here, amazing." And he's like, "I want you to go tell the king." He's like, no, bro, you got the wrong guy. Like, what have I done to deserve this? You are sending me to my death. Have you not heard? I'm kind of a good guy. I'm one of the good guys. I'm feeding people in caves. Like, I'm doing the work of the ministry. Like, that's what I'm doing. And here's the thing, Elijah, like, you would just send me to do this, and you'll get caught up in a spirit and blow away. Because Elijah was kind of known to do this. Like God would just take him and put him somewhere else. And he's like, I'm not going to go do this and tell him you're here and then him come and you be gone. And that's just a bad situation. I don't want to do it. And Elijah reassures him, says, listen, I'm telling you, go tell him I'll be here. And that's how that's going to be. And so he says, all right, I'll go talk to Ahab, tell him that you're here. And in the process, they come up with this thing where they're going to gather the people of God together, all of the nation of Israel, and they're going to put them in this arena of sorts on the top of Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal are going to sacrifice to their god, Baal, and Elijah is going to offer a sacrifice for God, for Yahweh on his side. And so they're going to have like a competition here to see who's really God. And so he gathers up everyone there. There's 450 prophets of Baal, and there's Elijah by himself. And this thing goes on, and the prophets are doing all their crazy stuff. They're trying to get Baal to burn up this offering, and Elijah, being who he is, starts mocking them and making fun of them a little bit and being like, hey, what's going on? Like, is Baal asleep? Like, maybe you need to yell a little louder, see if you can get his attention, because he knows that he serves the real living God. And so we get to this point here, and this is what he says to the people. It says, how long, he asks the nation of Israel, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him. Basically, he says, you're going to have to make a choice. All right, how long are you going to kind of play both sides of this? Today, let's settle it. Let's settle it today. Who are you going to follow? Who are you going to pursue? And then, of course, he prays, and God sends down the fire, and it burns up his offering and all the wood and all the stones and licks up all of the water that's been drenched in it, and God wins, right? God wins this. And it says this in verse, right above that. I have it on the screen. Let's put it up there. There we go, verse 39. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. So there is this catalytic moment in the nation of Israel where they've been following after their own hearts, after their own gods, and pursuing those things. And then this moment happens in their life where all of a sudden God reveals himself to be God, and there's a change that occurs. Right? There's a change that occurs in their life. There's a change that occurs in their culture. They destroy all the prophets of Baal. They destroy all of the temples to the false gods, all of those things. They get rid of all those things and begin to pursue God again. And so there's a revival of sorts that's taking place. There's this refocus and renewal that's going on in their hearts. And I feel like that's similar to maybe some things that happened in your life this weekend. As you got before God and you put your life before him and spent some intentional time pursuing him and chasing him and looking after the things of God, that he showed you some things in your heart, right? There were rocks that we found that are there under the soil that may be keeping us from growing and being the people that God's called us to be. And as he took those things out, we saw it, and there's this revival, right? There's this renewal. It's like, yeah, this is good. Like, this is what I was supposed to do. Like, maybe now I have some momentum. Maybe now I have some things. But what happens a lot of times is we get to that moment and we think, okay, that's what God had for me, right? Like that was it. This weekend in the rock, like that was all that God had for me, and that's enough. But what if there was more? What if there was more for you? In this passage, the nation of Israel turns their hearts around and they begin to pursue God. And then it says this in verse 41 and following, and this is where we're hang out. And Elijah said to Ahab, get up and eat and drink, for there is a sound of the rushing of rain. And so Ahab went up to eat and to drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel, and he bowed himself down on the earth and put his face between his knees. Here's this moment where the nation has seen God move, and Elijah tells Ahab to go eat and drink, for the rain was coming, though no one else could see it, right? There's no cloud in the sky. It hadn't rained in 3.5 years. And Elijah says, you know what? Let's get ready. You need to go eat and drink. Get your chariots ready, because the rain is coming. Right? The rain is coming. Elijah, by faith, hears the sound of abundance of rain on the way. Oftentimes, we come out of these kind of moments and we think, wow, that was awesome. But we stop and say, well, that was it. When in fact, that was just the beginning. For many of you, you've seen and you now know God, that God hears you, that he moves, that he speaks in your life? And what if, in fact, that was just the start of things in your life? There's still probably broken areas, right? Like when you left Sunday and went back to your house, you remembered, oh yeah, and this is tough. This is tough. There's still broken areas of sin and things in our heart that need mending and healing. There's still heartache that's there. There's still friends who are lost. God isn't through yet. He didn't stop working on Sunday, but maybe that was just the beginning of a season that he has for your life. Perhaps now that the rocks are out of the soil, there can be fruit that comes. Right? There can be fruit that comes. A spiritual plant that grows out of your life. But here's the thing, guys. In a dry and thirsty land, you need water. You need water. We need water in our life. We need the Spirit of God in our life for spiritual fruit to come out of it. So even though the rock may have been dug up, there's still a need for rain to come in your life. And can you hear that? Can you hear the sound of rushing rain? Elijah then finds a place to pray. He does this. He climbs up the mountain. He gets by himself. He's thanking God for the fire that just came, that awoken the people to the things of God. But at the same time, he's praying for water to come now. And though we don't know what he says when he's praying up there, we can know some things about it, that he was in a high and private place alone with God, and he positioned himself physically in a posture to reflect his spirit. He cast himself down on his knees with his head between his knees, where he begins crying out for a move of God, for a miracle to happen. And he was prepared to stay there however long it took. He positioned himself rightly under the heavens to be heard by God. And listen, this is so important that we have to position ourselves before God spiritually to be able to hear and know and see the things that God may be doing. And just full confession for me, what I do whenever I'm praying on my own is I get myself in a posture to be able to enter into the throne room of God. And for me, whenever I come into a moment like this where I'm like, God, I'm desperate to see you move. I'm desperate to see you change lives. I'm desperate to see you do something. I have to get down into a posture that's much different than just walking in, because I haven't seen it rain in 3.5 years, Elijah's saying. And this is what I need more than anything else, God. You've done so much to this point, but we are desperate to see you rain. And so for me, what I do is I get all the way down, all the way. It's like a song, right? Is that a song? No, it's all the way up. But the opposite of that, and just in all honesty, if you were walking my office on Wednesday afternoon, this is what you would see, and you'd think, oh gosh, he died. But to get myself in a posture of coming into the throne room of God, because listen, there's a fear of the Lord that's there, because he just shut off the water valve for 3.5 years. Right? It's not a fear of scaredness, but it's a fear of his majesty and his power and his authority, and recognizing that without him, we can do nothing. Without him, we can never accomplish. Without him, we could never be. And oh God, I need you. More than anything else in my life, I need you, Jesus. And he gets himself in a posture with his physical body so that he can quiet his heart and bring his soul into focus and say, God, I need to hear from you and for you to move in this. We need your reign. We need your reign in this moment. Elijah persevered in his prayers. He persevered in prayer. He orders his servant to go up and look toward the sea. And he went up there and looked, and he saw nothing. Right? Here he is, positioned crying out to God to move. And the first time the servant makes his way up the mountain, he doesn't see anything. He's looking around. He's like, man, is there a cloud somewhere in sight? Is there anything? There's nothing. He goes back. He tells Elijah, he's like, he comes in and he's just pouring out his heart before God. And he's like, hey, Elijah, there's no cloud. All right, there's no rain, just to let you know. And here's the deal. He perseveres in his prayer, and he's not allowing those things to discourage him or to pull him to the left or right, but he keeps praying. He will not be diverted as far as to even go look himself, but he is constant in pursuit and leaning into the presence of God to see if he can hopefully see a move of God and a cloud to come. And so with his heart and with his mind and his soul aligned, he's crying out for this thing, and he's doing it in such a way that like he is wrestling God in this moment. Like he is wrestling for the rain to come. It's like the story of Jacob as him and the Spirit begin to wrestle each other. If you ever read that story, that's wild as well. And then it touches his hip and dislocates it and all sorts of craziness happens. But that's what's going on here is he's wrestling. He's like, I'm not letting go until you move, God. I'm not letting go until you bless this, God. I'm not going anywhere until you pour out your Spirit. I will not be shaken. I will not be distracted. We are focused. We are here. We have seen. And God, we know that you are able, and we will not move until you do. We will not move until you do. We're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to chase anything else. We are here for you, God. That he will not let go until God speaks. I want you to imagine something, if you will, with me, that what if Elijah would have quit after the sixth time? After the sixth time that the servant made his way down the mountain and said, Elijah, there's no rain. There's no cloud. And Elijah was, well, that's it. We tried. It was a good effort. We got together. We prayed. Just wasn't the one. Or what if the servant got tired of walking those steps and decided, I haven't seen a cloud up to this point. I think I'm going to just take this one off. I'm not going to go look this time. We so oftentimes quit before the blessing in our spiritual life. We so oftentimes quit before the blessing. We give up before the outpouring of God. We give in when just on the other side of this is a great move of God, but on the seventh time, there was a cloud. Right? On the seventh time, there was a cloud. And from here, it may seem like a small hand, as the prophet said in this passage, that this cloud is beginning to rise up, and it's about the size of a small hand. It's the size of a small hand. And for many of us, we give up before we ever get to that point. And God has something for you just on the other side. Just on the other side of your persevering prayer, of you pressing into God. And that's a lot of P's. But as you lean into what God has for your life, so oftentimes we give up and we give in and we quit because it doesn't happen immediately in our world. And so much that, right? Like if you want to watch a movie, if I want to watch a movie, I'll go home tonight. It takes me seconds. You used to have to go to a store called Blockbuster and buy a movie. If it was there, it may already been rented. You have to wait a whole nother week. That's if they turned it in on time. We get everything so fast that sometimes in our spiritual life, we come to these moments and we just give up. We quit. The things that are underneath the soil of your heart, those rocks, are not just going to disappear immediately. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. It's going to take leaning into the presence and the power of God. Don't quit. Don't give up. Don't give in. It's worth it. Christ is worth it. That person that you talk to, that you invite, that just said no, keep going. It's worth it. On the other side of that invite might be his salvation. On the other side of your prayer, it might be life change for someone. There might be healing. Don't quit. Don't give up. Because there's a cloud. And even though it may be a small cloud, there's a thing about it, it'll begin to build. There may be a blessing on the other side of your obedience tonight. The way that you respond. There may be a fresh rain on the other side of your faithfulness. You may be on your 6th trip up the mountain, but tomorrow could be your 7th. Don't quit. Don't quit. God is on the move, and He is looking for people. There's a cloud. There's a cloud. Do you see it? Can you see it with your spiritual eyes? Can you see it on the horizon? Can you see it in faith that if you keep pursuing the things of God, there is rain that's coming? And the sky in verse 45 grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. There was a great rain. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being without rain for 3.5 years? It's been dry, food's running out. How great those sight of those clouds were as they begin to billow and build all up in the sky and start to turn dark, and the people are like, hey, it's going to do it. This is going to be it. It's going to rain this time. Are you ready for it? Let's gather around and let's stand under it. Oh, God, send it. Send it our way. And as it begins to rain, how jubilant and celebratory that would be. I mean, I would be running around. I'd have mud all over my face. I'd have my shirt off. It'd be weird. I'd take my kids and I'd just drag them through the mud just because. Like, it would be like snow, right, in Texas. Like, that's where I grew up. It snowed once. It snowed once in my life. It snowed. I don't even know what that is, but it snowed once. And you better believe that day that it snowed, we were standing around with our gloves on and our coats and our scarves, and it's like one little snowflake kind of making it. It's like, yes, this is the one. And we were so ready for that moment. Can you imagine what it was like to stand there after no rain for 3.5 years, and it just begins to come? And listen, guys, our world is so thirsty for the Spirit of God. Our people are so thirsty for the Spirit of God, and we're standing around saying, oh God, send your Spirit, send your rain into our life. We're desperate for it. We need it. We need it. We need you to move. We need an outpouring of God. We do. We do, because when the Spirit of God shows up, things change. It's no longer just this or that, but it's Him. It's Him. And I don't know where you're at, but I know one thing. There is more for you. There's more for you. Whatever it is, whatever God has done up to this point, there's more for you. We're going to have Jake come up here, and we're going to lean into that, because God is doing something, and I don't know about you, but I can see the cloud. I can see the cloud. I see it in faith. I see it in faith that you are the generation that God is going to use to pour out His blessing. I believe that. I prayed it this week with Kyle Reno. I believe that your generation is the one that's going to see a revival of God and a movement of God, but it comes whenever we position ourselves. Right? It comes whenever our hearts are positioned well, whenever our posture is right, whenever we set our sails for the Spirit of God to blow. We get ourselves in position. You have to believe. You have to keep pressing. You have to keep going. You have to keep persevering in prayer, in asking, in talking. To not revert back, to not accept the less than, and instead to seek the greater. And tonight is a night to lay it all down. To lay it all down. Anything that you've held on to up to this point, anything that this weekend, like you just never got there, that you have in there, maybe some small rocks that you just kind of play with, but you don't want to let go of, this is the time to lay it down. Anything you've held on to bring it to the foot of Jesus and to grab a hold of the altar of God and say, we will not move until you move, God. We will not move until you meet with us, before you show us, before you pour out your Spirit on us. God, we are here, and we're not just here to just hang out and sit in chairs and play some music and listen to some guy get up there and lose his mind, but we're here for you, Jesus. And we are not going to leave until you speak. And so tonight, what I want us to do in response is to do just that. So wherever you're at, just bow your heads. And let's cry out to God to move in our life. Let's cry out to God to do something in us. For an outpouring of the Spirit of God, that the rain will come. And let's do this. Let's position ourselves rightly. And I think that starts with a physical posture. So wherever you're at, if you want to get on your knees there by your seat, if you want to find a place to lay down, whatever it is in the position that you need to get in, let's talk to God, and let's not just sit here and say some pretty prayer, but let's get snotty. Let's get weeping, let's get gross, and let's just cry out for a move of God and say, God, we will not leave until you speak. We will not move until you move. We will not go until you say go, because we are here and there's nothing else to do. There's nowhere else to be but here, God. But here, where else would we go? Who else has life but you, Jesus? God, we're desperate for you. And as you cry out to God, as you lean into Him, we'll have things that you can pray. If you get stuck, they're on the screen, but just in your own heart, get after the presence of God. Cry out to Him to move. To move in your life, to move in your friend's life, to move in your family's life, to bring healing, to bring restoration, to bring life change, whatever it is, to just cry out to a living God who's here in this place. We don't serve a God of Baal. We serve Yahweh. We serve the living God. The God who hears and the God who's near. And if you have things in your heart, confess them. Let them go. I'm going to be quiet in just a minute. As you continue to cry out to God, on the tables on the side, there's some note cards, and on them, we're asking if you get to a place where God speaks to you and He says, listen, this is what you're doing, this is where we go, and you hear from God and you meet with God, and you can answer this question. You just go and get a note card and you can put yes on it. Put yes on it, and then come put it on the table in the middle. It's just a symbol to say, God, my yes is on the table. Whatever it is that you're calling me to, the answer is yes. Whatever it is that you want from me, the answer is yes, God. I will give up everything for you, God. As you pray, as you seek, you just follow Him.